The fourth defect is argumentativeness and disputation. Al-mira' wal-jidal. وَذَلِكَ مَنْهِيٌ عَنْ. And this is forbidden. Now when we read this section we have to think carefully, because after all, what we were saying yesterday at Fajr time is that Imam al-Ghazali is kind of a fighter. He's the one who explains in some detail what the Arab philosophers got disastrously wrong. He's the one who refutes the Ismailis. He seems to have a book in which he refutes Christian doctrine. He has a book in which he refutes antinomian Sufis, Sufis that don't bother with the Sharia. He's really a fighter. So when we read this section, we have to realize that what he's talking about is a certain type of speech that is argumentativeness, that is from the disputatious nature of human beings, rather than that which comes from a dispassionate defense of the religion of Allah and His Messenger. So he says, وَذَلِكَ مَنْهِيٌ عَنْ. This is forbidden. قال صلى الله عليه وسلم لا تماري أخاك ولا تمازحه ولا تعده موعدا فتخلفه. The Prophet says, صلى الله عليه وسلم, do not egotistically dispute with your brother, and do not joke with him by telling lies, and do not make a promise to him that you then fail to keep. وقال عليه السلام ذروا المراء فإنه لا تفهم حكمته ولا تؤمن فتنته. And he said, عليه السلام, turn aside from disputation, because the wisdom in it is not understood, and the fitna in it cannot be defended against. So when the ego is involved in particularly religious disputation, there is always more heat than light. The hikmah is veiled. Even if you're defending something that is true, if your ego is engaged, the wisdom of the case that you're making is lost, and the fitna cannot be protected against. وقال صلى الله عليه وسلم, this is a famous hadith, من ترك المراء وهو محق بني له بيت في أعلى الجنة ومن ترك المراء وهو مبطل بني له بيت في ربض الجنة. Whoever renounces disputatiousness, even when he is right, shall receive a palace in the highest part of paradise. And whoever renounces disputatiousness when he is wrong, a house shall be built for him in the lower part of paradise. وعن سلمة رضي الله عنها قالت قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم إن أول ما عهد إلي ربي ونهاني عن بعد عبادة الأوثان وشرب الخمر ملاحاة الرجال. The Holy Prophet said, sallallahu alayhi wasallam, the first thing in which my Lord took a covenant from me, after that I should not worship idols or drink alcohol, was to enter into egotistic disputation with others. وقال أيضا ما ضل قوم بعد أن هداهم الله إلا أوتوا الجدل. Never does a people go astray after having been guided by Allah, but that they were given disputation. In other words, this egotistic disputation, particularly in matters of religion, is a major reason why people go astray. It introduces the principle of hawa, and hence leads people into interpretations and, as we said yesterday, theory choices that are based on the fiery might of the ego, rather than on a cool and dispassionate survey of the issues. If people go astray, it tends to be as a result of polemics, disputatiousness, and you see a lot of that in internet polemic, for instance, and furious comments posted after people put up YouTube clips. Most of that is precisely this mira' You can see the fire of people's anger at work, their own insecurities, their hatred, their polemic. All of that is the kind of mirat that the Holy Prophet ﷺ is forbidding and identifying as a cause of people going astray after having been guided. وقال أيضا لا يستكمل عبد حقيقة الإيمان حتى يدع المراء وإن كان محقا. Allah's slave will not perfect the true nature of Iman until he has set aside disputatiousness, even if he is right. وقال أيضا ست من كن فيه بلغ حقيقة الإيمان. And he said, sallallahu alayhi wasallam, there are three qualities which, if they are present in a man, cause him to reach the true reality of Iman. الصيام في الصيف, fasting in summer, وضرب أعداء الله بالسيف, and striking at Allah's enemies with the sword, وتعجيل الصلاة, and ensuring that the prayer is done at the beginning of its time, والصبر على المصيبات, and being patient in the face of misfortunes, وإسباغ الوضوء على المكاره, and making wudu even when it's unpleasant or inconvenient, وترك المراء, and renouncing disputatiousness, وهو الصادق, even when he's right. Yes, and then there's a number of sayings here from the Imams. Famously, Imam Malik bin Anas, rahimahullah, said, لَيْسَ هَذَا الْجِدَالُ مِنَ الدِّينِ فِي شَيْءٍ. This disputatiousness, this argumentativeness, has no place in religion. And Imam Malik was famous for falling silent or walking out of a majlis if he saw people in his majlis engaging in heated disputatiousness and argument. وقال أيضا المراء يقسي القلوب ويورث الضغائن. And he said also, this is Imam Malik, that disputatiousness hardens the hearts and bequeaths resentments. وقال ابن أبي ليلى لا أماري صاحبي فإما أن أكذبه وإما أن أغضبه. Ibn Abi Layla, famous early Qadi, used to say, I would never enter into a disputatious argument with my friend because I would either show him to be, or claim that he is lying, or I would anger him. And then somewhere he comes up with وقال عيسى عليه السلام من كثر كذبه ذهب جماله. Isa said عليه السلام, whoever lies frequently, his beauty is taken away. ومن لاح الرجال سقطت مروته. And whoever disputes with other men, his manhood shall be taken away. وَمَنْ كَثُرَ هَمُّهُ سَقُمَ جِسْمُهُ. And whoever is frequently stressed, his body shall become ill. وَمَنْ سَاءَ خُلُقُهُ عَذَّبَ نَفْسَهُ. And whoever's character is bad punishes his own self. Okay, and now he comes up with the definition of mira'. وحد المراء هو كل اعتراض على كلام الغير بإظهار خلل فيه. The definition of disputatiousness is every objection to the statements of others which takes the form of manifesting a fault in them. إما في اللفظ, either in the form of their words, وإما في المعنى, or in the actual content. وإما في قصد المتكلم and then he says, if you're in an argument with somebody, وَلَمْ يَكُنْ مُتَعَلِّقًا بِأُمُورِ الدِّينِ, and the dispute has nothing to do with the affairs of religion, فَاسْكُتْ, then you should be silent, anhu. والطعن في كلام الغير تارة يكون في لفظه بإظهار خلل فيه من جهة النحو أو من جهة اللغة أو من جهة العربية. Sometimes attacking somebody else's speech can take the form of its form of words, so that one points out to an error in grammar or syntax or the use of Arabic vocabulary, أو من جهة النظم, or in terms of its organization as poetry or prose, وَالتَّرْتِيبُ بِسُوء تَقْدِيم أو تَأْخِير, or pointing to defects in the way one's opponent's argument is constructed, because they put some things in the wrong place in the argument. وَذَلِكَ يَكُونُ تَارَةً مِنْ قُصُورِ الْمَعْرِفَةِ وَتَارَةً يَكُونُ بِطُغْيَانِ اللِّسَانِ. Sometimes it can take the form of pointing out insufficient knowledge, sometimes by pointing out somebody's lapse of the tongue or slips of the pen. So this is the first of the categories that he's talking about, actually attacking the form of words of your opponent. And often the ego in disputatiousness takes pleasure in finding somebody tripping over their words or failing to quote something or misquoting something, even though these things are not really relevant to whether the argument is valid or not. Somebody gets a Quranic quote wrong or something in his case, and then you pounce on that. And it's always the ego that's doing that. That's a debating trick. And this is part of what Imam al-Ghazali is talking of when he speaks of Murad. And it can also be in terms of the meaning. And in this context, This has much to do with Imam al-Ghazali's own inner traumas. If you recall the great sort of culminating moment, or the low point, I guess, of his life, if you've seen the movie, and I don't know, there might be an opportunity for them to screen it here if some of you have not seen it. He was somebody who was very much part of the scholarly class of his day, and indeed was the lead scholar, the top professor in his academic world, then as now an egotistic world, highly competitive, in which there was endless disputatiousness, and if you won the disputes, either in writing or in various formalized seminar or public debate situations, you would earn preferment, you would get a better salary, you would have more students, you would get the plum jobs. It was a world in which, to the extent you could egotistically push your arguments, you would get material rewards. And it seems to have been this that triggered Imam al-Ghazali's great crisis. In the middle of his lecture, he fell silent, a kind of nervous breakdown, really, because he was wondering whether he was doing all of this just to show off to his colleagues, to show off to his students, whether the arguments that he was deploying against the enemies of his madhab and of his school of kalam were in fact arguments that were based on his own particular egotistic desire to be better than them, or whether they were really based on a dispassionate desire to serve the religion of Allah. And that's why this point is particularly important. Actually, this section on Murad is the longest of these sections. And he returns to it again in the Ihya, in a book towards the end, which is called Kitab Dhamm al-Ghurur, the book of the reproach of beguilement or vainglory. Ghurur is a kind of pride that distracts you from the truth. The ego that takes you to hell, even when you seem formally to be defending the truth. And he saw this as being a real subversion and a danger. That the mere fact of knowing that you are defending the truth can be an ego trip. And much of the Ihya, if not all of the Ihya, can be understood as an attempt to winkle out the demons of the ego from the souls of the ulama class of his day. He saw this as being extraordinarily subversive, that even the great khatibs and the great imams, even though they were absolutely right in their bayans, in their khutbahs, in their writings, they were subverted by a lack of ikhlas, by a lack of sincerity, because they were hoping for a bag of gold from the Sultan. They were hoping for some kind of buzz in their immediate collegial environment, or even in themselves, because they had won a famous victory in disputation or in a logical sequence of arguments against a rival point of view. And it's very easy for the academic ego to get off on this. And one of the great merits of Imam al-Ghazali is that he's a great psychologist, and does not just psychologize about the masses or the merchants or whoever it might be, but he psychologizes above all about his own class, about the class of ulama. And this is one reason why his books have been so loved by the ulama, because they are a very helpful way of reminding them of the dangers of their task, that knowing that you are right is a dangerous thing. Why does Imam al-Bukhari put at the very beginning of his Sahih, which is the Kitab Bad al-Wahi, the book of the beginning of revelation, a hadith that has nothing to do with the beginning of revelation, but is إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ. Actions are only by intentions. He puts that at the beginning to remind himself and to remind everybody who comes to study it and to memorize it and to learn about it and to write commentaries on it, that you should not be beguiled by the fact that here you are with the greatest book of hadith about the greatest prophet that's ever lived, a great text of the greatest religion ever. MashaAllah, you're the great conveyor of this sacred trust. But he's saying, don't admire me for this, because only Allah knows if I'm sincere or not. And that's a very Ghazalian moment in Imam al-Bukhari. It's characteristic of the hadith scholars that they remember the danger of the task that they're embarked upon. But very often we don't, and very often religious leaders are full of themselves, and they love the pomp and circumstance of riding in the Mercedes next to the head of the ministry, or next to the President of the Republic, or whatever it might be. That's a danger for religious leaders, or they get an OBE in the British context, or whatever it is. You have to be aware of that. That's very un-Ghazalian to be part of that world of gongs and tokens of esteem, because the alim is somebody who wants to follow the truth irrespective of whether that makes him popular or not. And this also has significance for our situation as ordinary Muslims, because it's human nature, given that we're weak, to crave praise and to have arguments that are publicly respected. And when we're not praised but we're despised, or the victims of Islamophobia, or whatever you choose to call it, or where our arguments are not respected, the ego is dented. And that becomes dangerous, and that can lead to aberrant behavior in our communities, or it can lead to depression, or it can lead to determination to change the religion in order to please the people who are regarded as having opinions which matter. And all of this is subversive. But the real Muslim really doesn't care what people think. He only cares what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala thinks. And his way to knowing what is the divine judgment is through following the consensus of the ulama. And we need to be aware of this, because a lot of Muslims are upset, particularly living in the West. Why is it that they don't love us? It doesn't matter. And maybe it's natural that they don't love us, because they're the ones who are producing the civilization that Hello magazine sells how many 100,000 copies a week. That really is where their cultural investment is. Compare that to the religious magazines in their culture. If those are their priorities, why should we be happy when they praise us? We have to be quite realistic about this, and there are too many. You see it at David Cameron's Eid parties, for instance, all of these community leaders who are just so happy, sort of simpering, so delighted when the great man comes along and shakes their hands and very sincerely asks them who they are. And it's kind of a great moment for them, and they want to order the photograph afterwards. And this is what the Imam is talking about and this is something that is death to religion. And part of the greatness of the Ghazalian interpretation and its ongoing freshness is the fact that he warns his own people, his own class, his own caste, himself about this. Okay, now towards the end of this section there was something that I also wanted to share with you. Yeah, here he returns to the subject that he raised at the end of the preceding section. Which is disputatiousness amongst Muslims. And here he says, ينبغي للإنسان أن يكف لسانه عن أهل القبلة. A human being ought to restrain his speech, ought to restrain his tongue from criticizing the Ahl al-Qibla. This is the most generic term that the Sharia has for people who are broadly within the circle of Islam. Some of them are mubtadi', some of them are who knows what, but they face the Qibla, so they deserve protection. This is what Imam al-Ghazali is saying. He's not saying that you abstain from criticizing only your own madhab. He's saying you abstain from criticizing the Ahl al-Qibla in general. وَإِذَا رَأَى مُبْتَدِعًا. Okay, so what do you do if you see somebody who does have a heresy, who thinks that there were 12 infallible imams, and if you don't follow them, you can't receive salvation? Or somebody who thinks that Imam Ali was an unbeliever, or somebody who thinks that Allah doesn't know the future, or somebody with clearly aberrant ideas. Does this important principle of not disputing with others apply, because the ego might experience an ego trip? He says, وَإِذَا رَأَى مُبْتَدِعًا تَلَطَّفَ فِي نُصْحِهِ فِي خَلْوَةٍ. When he sees a person of bid'ah, he gently counsels him in a private place. This is his solution. The danger is the heretic is standing in front of you in the Oxford Union debating society, and the whole world is watching, and there's a live stream, and you really want to win the argument, otherwise whoever it is going to win, and you think the whole world will be misled as a result. And so the ego immediately starts to charge in, and it's extremely difficult. And the Imam has come up with a number of sayings. There's one from Imam Abu Hanifa, who said that the hardest form of mujahada is to abstain from making a point in a public argument if you know that your opponent is wrong. That's the hardest thing to do. So how do you do it? Well, Imam al-Ghazali is here saying something that is unglamorous, but is very much part of the method of the ulama. You don't engage in huge public disputations, except with people who are outside the millah, people who are atheists or communists or whatever it might be. Dispute with them by all means. But once they're of the people of the Qibla, you take them into a private place and you talattafa fi nushi. He says you gently admonish them. لا بطريق الجدل, not by means of disputation. Yep. And he says that the danger of disputation with such people is that it tends to turn it into a contest of egos, or a contest of tribes or groups, and actually reinforces the obstinacy of the other party. فَتَسْتَمِرُّ الْبِدْعَةُ فِي قَلْبِهِ بِالْجَدَلِ. By disputatiousness, the bid'ah remains and continues in his heart. وَتَتَأَكَّدْ, and is reinforced. فَإِذَا عَرَفَ أَنَّ النُّصْحَ لَا يَنْفَعْ اشْتَغَلَ بِنَفْسِهِ وَتَرَكَهُ. And if finally you recognize that counsel is not making any headway, what do? اشتغل بنفسه وتركه. You focus on improving yourself and you just leave him alone. وقال رحم الله من كف لسانه عن أهل القبلة إلا بأحسن ما يقدر عليه. This is a saying of one of the Salaf. May Allah show His mercy to whoever restrains his speech from criticizing the people of the Qibla, except according to the best method that he is capable of finding. And then another sting in the tail. وكل من اعتاد المجادلة مدة وأثنى الناس عليه. And everybody who is used to disputatiousness and who is praised by people as a result of his debates, وجد لنفسه بسببه عزا وقبولا. He finds that there is a kind of glory and an acceptance in his soul. قويت فيه هذه المهلكات ولا يستطيع عنها نزوعا إذا اجتمع عليه سلطان الغضب والكبر والرياء وحب الجاه والتعزز بالفضل وآحاد هذه الصفات يشق مجاهدتها فكيف بمجموعها. And again, he closes on this psychological note. So anybody who's constantly disputing, he's always going on these internet forums and making his point and criticizing others, and obviously the ego is inflamed, and he's very happy if he's winning a lot of these debates. He finds that a whole range of muhlikat, destructive vices and traits, prevail in him, and he will be unable to overcome them. لا يستطيع عنها نزوعا. Because he is now ruled by the sultan of anger and of pride and of ostentation and of love of status and of taking pleasure in superiority. And any one of these qualities is hard to cope with. So what of the case of somebody who is suffering from all of them?